Long ago, there was nothing but land and space, just the coexistence of both nothing and something. Yet there was an ever-growing drive for more, a desire to fill the space that crossed between nothing and something. And thus the land and space conjured up a being, the inner sloth. The inner sloth was a peaceful being. All he desired was company and stability. So he created new beings called the AMOGUS, and to keep the AMOGUS in check, he made 5 more gods that would help to keep the AMOGUS in order. These gods became known as the AMOGI. Redlikov was first and adopted his role as the god of warfare. He was known to be aggressive, his figure displaying a violent red hue with swirls of flame. To match his flamboyant color, he toted a mohawk with pride. Then Cynos was made, becoming the god of innovation, bearing a bright sign color with streaks of darker blue. He was an eccentric one, and he would be found wearing goggles or glasses at all times. Blackos was next, becoming god of wisdom but quite rude. One could recognize him by his deep black shade resembling a void, and he would never be seen without a sizable top hat. Soon followed Limezilla, goddess of agriculture. Among the Amogai, she was the nicest but quite ditzy. Her soft pastel lime coloring would match the random foliage and plant-like substances that would constantly cover her. And finally came Pinkius, who became goddess of love. Though often manipulative and mischievous, she possessed a rosy pink hue, often donning golden trinkets and jewelry. All was well. The Amogai did their jobs, and many of the Amogus would start forming clans around the Amogai. Innersloth felt at peace and decided to go slumber for a few hundred years. However, as time went on, something ominous started brewing. Redlikov realized how much the Amogai had to do, while Innersloth did nothing. Redlikov, with the force of a raging fire, burned up with anger and started developing emotions of hatred, wrath, and jealousy. A seed of rebellion in his mind grew, and he started thinking about overthrowing Innersloth. He went to find the other Amogai, thinking of a plan to get them on his side. He first tried to approach Limezilla since she could be swayed easily. However, Redlikov instead found Limezilla in the midst of an argument with Cynos, for Cynos had built another one of his inventions on her plants, destroying her crops. Cynos was always fidgety, like a spark of electricity, moving in odd and unpredictable ways. The fight eventually stopped, and Redlikov watched Cynos storm off from Limezilla. Redlikov decided to stick to his plan and approach Limezilla, telling her how much of a better ruler he would be, and that if his rebellion were to succeed, she would be offered a much better position. However, both of them did not notice Blackos and Pinkius nearby, who overheard the whole conversation. Pinkius, upon hearing Redlikov's plan, told Blackos that they should team up as well, but Blackos would later find out that it was all a lie, and she even tried turning his clan against him. So the days passed, and 5 Amogai all had their own doubts brewing. Eventually, the tension grew so thick one could cut it with a knife, and the Amogai knew that they could no longer try to ignore it, so they met up. "Friends," Radlikov started roughly, "I'm sure you all know why we are here today." "Yeah, this is all because you somehow got the idea you could actually be a leader," Blackos interrupted abruptly. "With a brain like yours? No way. But with someone as smart as me? Now that would be great." This brought Blackos a burning glare from Redlikov. Limezilla started timidly. What's wrong with what we have now?" "Isn't it obvious?" Pinkius huffed. "It's all because the guys can't get it together. They got a couple of followers, and it got to their heads." "You're one to talk. Who is it that suggested teamwork but tried turning my clan against me?" Blackos spat. Not my problem. Don't take it too personally." "Bzz, alright, I see. Ha-ha!" Cynos exclaimed out of nowhere. "Guys, let's all listen to Redlikov for now. He did organize the meeting," Limezilla pronounced. "You're only saying that because he offered you a good position," Blackos retorted. "What gives him the power to decide that?" "That is true," Pinkius added. No, it's not," Limezilla shouted, her plants picking up with thorns. I can think for myself." "Think for yourself as much as an iceberg can sleep in a forest," Cynos chirped up. "You're about as sturdy as those plants I built over. Ha!" he added condescendingly. Quickly, the meeting devolved into arguments and fighting, the Amogai all shouting over one another, and then Redlikov slammed his hands down, bringing the commotion to still silence. "That's enough," he barked. "I'm going to be leader. Anyone who opposes that, you can face me head-on. I'll be rounding up my clan and we will proceed tomorrow. All is fair game." With that, he vanished, leaving the rest of the Amogai in shock, but one by one they left as well, getting ready to gather their people. The fight started small, but gradually devolved into an all-out war. Amogus were dying and the world as they knew it was falling apart. Innersloth felt the commotion and woke up for the first time in 500 years. He was enraged to find that the peaceful creation left behind had fallen apart, leaving nothing but a memory of what it used to be. In a blind rage, he wiped out a majority of the civilization, leaving only a few Amogus remaining so they would remember the fear and never act out again. Then, Innersloth rounded up the 5 Amogai, imprisoning them in this stranded confinement he conjured in the deepest depths of space. "My children," his voice boomed, "you have disappointed me. Until you learn to resolve your issues and set aside your flaws, you will learn what it is like to feel fear at the hands of your former comrade. Good luck." The The Amogai were scared, but Blackos, being his arrogant self, said, Innersloth is obviously bluffing to scare us. However, Cynos piped up, but what if he is serious? Then what? Redlikov started laughing. Innersloth is just an old fool. He's just trying to scare us into submission again. Let's rise up again to overthrow him. The other gods started cheering and wanted to join and rise up again. Innersloth was disappointed seeing the reaction the Amogai had, and he decided to create the spirit of death. Then when it possessed people, it made them murderous and bloodthirsty. The spirit descended down and claimed one of the Amogai for its own, yet the rest were too caught up in their own world to notice, only coming back to the senses as the lights flickered off, leaving them in the darkness. A sound of a knife swishing. The lights flickered back on as the Amogai were still processing what had just happened, and then they saw Cynos dead on the ground with a stab wound and blood around his body. Seeing the dead corpse, they were frozen with fear, a feeling they had never experienced before. They started yelling and ran away in their own separate directions. Pinkius ran as fast and as far as she could until she ran to wall glass. As she gasped for breath, she heard a vent opening and closing in the dark. As she looked into the reflection of the glass, she froze up like a deer caught in headlights as a looming figure approached. And then the last thing she saw, the gleam of a knife. She screamed. Nearby, Limezilla heard Pinkius's voice echo through the halls. She went to investigate the commotion and saw Pinkius's dead body on the ground. She felt overwhelmed but saw that there was a megaphone hanging on the wall nearby. In a frenzy, she ran over and screamed into the megaphone, alerting everyone that Pinkius was dead. The emergency button was pressed, and an alarm blared through the halls as everyone came together to investigate who had been committing these murders. An aura of suspense hung in the air, the remaining three going through emotional and physical torture, not knowing who they could trust. No one dared to say a word, but as they exchanged worried glances, all they could see was a shell of their former selves. They realized how power-hungry and pitiful they had become, like stray dogs that had no home to return to. I know a solution. Why don't you both just go jump into space? I know I'm not the killer, and then we'll be fine and dandy, Blacko spoke up, breaking the silence. What sort of absurdity is that? Limezilla began, but stopping when she realized Redlikov was behind Blacko's, knife raised high in the air. She screamed and ran, hearing the sound of a stab behind her, not daring to look back. She cried and cried, begging for mercy, begging for this nightmare to end. Innersloth witnessed Limezilla's despair, and he felt pain towards her sorrow and fear, but he knew he had to stay firm. Innersloth snapped his fingers, and all the gods reappeared together, the spirit of death vanquished. They were all well and healthy again, but not without the memory of the horror they went through. They pleaded for forgiveness, hoping to never have to live through it again. However, Innersloth had not sensed any change in the Amogai, realizing they only wanted to save themselves. But he also did feel a pang of sympathy and said that once every year, the Amogai would be forced into this ritual again, and the cycle would be doomed to repeat until the day they have completely changed, to which he would prevent it from ever happening again. Thus became AMOGUS, a ritual that was birthed as a consequence of the Amogai's flaws.